Hi everyone, welcome back. The big takeaways from chapter 11 on schizophrenia and psychotic disorders are these. Really interesting chapter here again. Takeaway number one, first of all, schizophrenia is one of the disorders you've probably actually heard of before you took this course. Note that its popular knowledge is not due to its commonness, but rather the popular knowledge is due to the devastating effects of the individuals who are diagnosed with schizophrenia. Schizophrenia is actually a very rare disorder. About 1 or 2% of the population, perhaps, has the diagnosis. But thankfully, it is rare because think about this. To lose the bearings of one's mind must be a horrifying experience. And the unpredictable nature of the thoughts and mental images and voices that can enter the mind can make completely unpredictable emotional outbursts, and on occasion some wild or seemingly crazy behavior, even violent behavior, if a patient thinks that she or he is being targeted in some way. So know that actually it's a very rare disorder, about 1 or 2% of the population perhaps. Even if you have heard of this before, seen it in movies, things like that, it's actually pretty rare. The second big takeaway in this chapter, of all of the theoretical models discussed way back in chapter 2, the biological model is the best explanation for understanding schizophrenia. Recall the biological model views abnormal behavior and assumes the existence of an underlying physical disorder, specifically some kind of biochemical abnormality in the brain, or perhaps genetic inheritance genes, are responsible for symptoms of a psychological and emotional disorder that we diagnose as psychologists. Here, genes do explain schizophrenia. It is true that every person diagnosed with schizophrenia had a blood relative come before them who had schizophrenia. It is in their gene pool. They will pass it down to their children. So as you can imagine, in the biological model, the treatment for schizophrenia, the goal then is to relieve symptoms by eliminating or controlling the biological cause of abnormal behavior. So the most common treatment for schizophrenia is drug therapy, of course, medications, an antipsychotic type of medication. By the way, any subsequent talk therapy for schizophrenia, if any sort of psychotherapy occurs at all, consists of what is called supportive therapy. The drugs come first, again, like you've seen before, but what follows, if there is some sort of talk therapy, supportive therapy, which is designed to help a patient with schizophrenia to manage their emotions and their thoughts, to reduce stress in their lives, because when a person's under stress, their schizophrenic symptoms get worse. To help patients with schizophrenia to better interact with others, to build supportive relationships. A support network is really valuable, but hard to have when a patient with schizophrenia is exhibiting strange behavior. It's hard to keep friends. These improved social interaction skills that can come from talk therapy are pretty important, because social support, having friends, loved ones, would be a buffer against stress, would help the patient, would be a buffer against emotional vulnerability in patients with schizophrenia. So a social network is a really good thing. We'd like to help them develop one. And lastly, the third takeaway from this chapter, note that crazy behavior, I don't like to use the word crazy too much, but crazy behavior does not mean that we are seeing irrational behavior. This is a fine difference, but it's an important one that I want to point out. Recall how thoughts drive emotions, and the two together drive behavior. Thoughts drive emotions, thoughts and emotions together drive behavior. When we see schizophrenic behavior, for example, if I was having thoughts, hallucinations, that a large bird kept landing on my shoulders, I'm walking down the street and this big bird keeps landing on my shoulders, I would feel pretty frightened, and I would be showing avoidance behavior. I might be running down the street, I might be shouting, "Hey, get away from me!" I might be shouting and looking up as I see, I'm hallucinating, this bird that keeps landing on my shoulder. My shouting, my running, my ducking behavior may seem pretty strange to people who are watching and may look pretty crazy to onlookers. But think about this. This is a completely rational reaction to what I am seeing, even though I'm having a hallucination. If I'm seeing this bird attacking me, to what I'm feeling, fear, my reactions are perfectly rational. If any one of us were in a similar experience, we would be behaving quite similarly. So takeaway number 3 here is crazy behavior does not mean we are seeing irrational behavior. It's actually quite rational to want to avoid or escape from an attacking bird, isn't it? You and I have yet to understand what the patient is seeing and hearing. Then their behavior would probably make much more sense and not seem crazy. So in summary, the 3 big takeaways from this really interesting chapter on schizophrenia. Number 1, schizophrenia is very rare, about 1 to 2% of the population. Second big takeaway, the biological model has the biggest impact on our understanding of schizophrenia. Genes play an enormous role in explaining and understanding schizophrenia. Every person diagnosed with schizophrenia had a blood relative come before them who also had schizophrenia. Also, the most common treatment for schizophrenia would be drug therapy or medication, not talk therapy. Talk therapy can be added on, but drugs come first and drugs will always be there. Lastly, of course, the third big takeaway, note that crazy behavior does not mean we are seeing irrational behavior or symptoms. It is quite rational to react to strange thoughts or voices that a person is experiencing. If you and I had the same thoughts, the same hallucinations, you would likely be behaving the same way and look just as crazy to another person. Those are the big takeaways from this chapter on schizophrenia and psychotic disorders. Thanks, everybody.